it is true that everything that is said there is factually right, but I think the main takeaway for me was that there was a lot of cherry picking in the data.
Hi, Udit. Thank you for joining us. We wanted to understand what was the white paper that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented in the Parliament yesterday. Can you tell us about this document?
Essentially, the white paper is on the Indian economy, and in particular, the 2 decades that have just gone by. The first decade between 2004 and 14 was the rule under United Progressive Alliance, which was led by the Congress. And then the last 10 years have been under the BJP-led NDA. And essentially, the white paper is an exercise to compare the 2 decades and show how the first decade UPA mismanaged the economy, and in the second decade, the NDA has brought about all the changes, improved it, and salvaged the economy and set it on a proper path to growth. So that's essentially the white paper.
Okay, so how India's economy did during UPA versus NDA, right? So why is it being presented right now? We know that the Lok Sabha elections are like nearby. Can you tell us the significance of the document being presented at this point in time? Also, I had one more question to that. What was the highlight of this document, if something stood out for you?
Yeah, so I mean, the significance is more political than economic because of the way the paper has been written. It is political because we are about to get into the election season, and this seems like an exercise more in panning everything that happened during the first decade under UPA and exalting everything that has happened in the last 10 years. And so it's sadly more a political white paper than really a good diagnosis of what happened to the economy. That being said, it is true that everything that is said there is factually right, but I think the main takeaway for me was that there was a lot of cherry picking in the data, and it managed to tell in truth all that was wrong with UPA and all that was right with NDA, but at the same time managed to completely avoid all that was wrong in the NDA and all that was right in the UPA. So in that sense, it sort of undermined its own credibility.
And what are the most important claims in the white paper? In your explained, you have mentioned like the UPA government inherited a healthy economy, but made it non-performing in 10 years. So can you also talk about some of the important claims in the white paper?
Yes. So, some of the main points that one can understand is that the white paper says that the UPA government, when it took charge in 2004, which incidentally was taking charge from a NDA government, although it was a coalition with BJP leading it under Prime Minister Vajpayee. So the claim is that UPA government inherited a healthy economy and that it turned it into a non-performing economy over the next 10 years, and that it mismanaged the economy, undermined the macroeconomic foundations of the economy, and it led to a lot of scams and policy paralysis. All of that was mentioned, and many of these things are actually very well known. That there was a significant phase where in the second half of UPA we saw a lot of questions on the policy making, and there was a certain amount of policy paralysis. So that was the main thrust of the first part of the the white paper. The second part of the paper essentially tells about how the NDA government has actually done very well on many parameters, say, anything between making toilets to providing subsidies to everything, it's a whole host of factors that they've used. That broadly is the scope of the white paper.
The document shows the brighter side of the economy under the NDA government, but you mentioned in your explain that it ignores all that is amiss with the economy. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, the first thing to understand is that for any economy over 10 years or 20 years, analyzing it is a daunting task. So many things change. And you can always cherry pick data. You can always find five things which are very good about an economy and just present that. And you can alternatively pick only five things which are very good about an economy and just present that. Now, in terms of what all changed, for example, one of the things that has been again highlighted is that India was part of a fragile five in 2013. Now, if you look back at 2013, it is true that to some extent policy mismanagement and policy paralysis or weak leadership, whatever one might ascribe, could have been a big part of the problem. But there were many other contributory factors. For example, when we talk about high inflation towards the last 2-3 years of UPA rule, we talk about very sharp decline in inflation in the first 2 years of NDA. What the paper does not mention is that crude oil prices, which is a very substantive component of inflation for India because we import 80% of it. Crude oil prices ranged between $105 and $111 a barrel in the last 3 years of UPA, and then they fell in the first 2 years of NDA from that high level of 111, $110 to around mid 80s and then mid 40s. So it was a sharp decline, and that actually was one big reason why we saw a moderation in inflation. Now, this part is not mentioned. Similarly, the white paper totally discounts the fastest growth that India has seen in its history between 2004 and 2009 by saying that that was a lagged effect of the Vajpayee government. Now, Vajpayee government was there for 5 years. The lagged effects of that for next 4 years seems really stretching it. So I am certain that there are some positives that are there, but to say that all the growth was essentially because of the Vajpayee government is stretching it. Similarly, fiscal rectitude is one thing that the white paper talks about. And it is true that on fiscal parameters, there was a slippage after the global financial crisis during the UPA rule. But it is also true that the only time we've met fiscal parameters was under UPA rule. They have a much better record in terms of fiscal rectitude. You look at aggregate data on growth and fiscal rectitude, it's better in the 10 years under UPA, despite the global financial crisis. And both the governments have had two crises in that sense. There was a global financial crisis in UPA's time, and there was the COVID crisis in NDA's time. So it's a fairly comparable thing. It's just that on many parameters, this white paper does not talk about the misses that have been there in the NDA rule, which is that there's no talk about unemployment. The word does not exist in the white paper.
Yeah.
Even when government data itself shows that unemployment had been at a 45-year high in 2017-18, or the fact that census was not done when even neighboring Pakistan and Bangladesh have done it. And we've managed to somehow miss out on census, which is a fundamental data for the country to work on. So I mean, it's a mixed bag of results and presents a sort of a misaligned picture of the 2 decades.
Thank you so much, Udit, for joining us. And if you want to read about this, the white paper in detail, you can log on to www.indianexpress.com and check out Udit Mishra's Explained. Thank you so much for joining us.